Hello and welcome to Newsnight. I'm Neota Egbe. In layman terms, democracy is described as a government of the people, by the people, for the people, and comprising three arms: the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. Across the world, people and institutions pursue the entrenching of democratic tenets in their society. The success of that determined by governance. My guest on Newsnight today believes that the bedrock of democracy as defined, the legislature, because it's representing the people, has not been given its due in Nigeria. He alleges that democratic tenets may not be effectively entrenched unless the legislature takes its place and utilizes its power to ensure the laws that it has enacted are followed through by the executive. Newsnight talks to the Director General of the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, Professor Suleiman Abubakar. Professor Suleiman Abubakar, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure, thank you.
You are the Director General of the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, just to be clear on that. Now, when one hears of the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies and looks at Nigeria's governance system, which is a democracy, one wonders, let's start from there. What's the role of your institute in Nigeria's democratic space?
Thank you very much. The essence of the institute, that is the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies, which was conceived in the year 2011 by an act of parliament, which was signed into by President Jonathan, Goodluck Jonathan then, was to bridge the gap between the various organs of government. In other words, you could recall that this country, just like any other African countries, we have fall victims, of so many military interruption in our politics. And as such, at every point the military struck, the major casualty normally was the legislature. And as a result of that, while the judiciary were left, to continue, and perhaps the executive, for the past 3 years, we have a judiciary and the executive that you can say relatively matured. They have the skill, they have the knowledge, they have the experience. But unlike the two organs of government, the legislature, which to me is the epitome of democracy, on account of this military interregnum, could not really catch up with the two arms of government. They don't have the maturity, they don't have the experience, they don't have the skill. So to now bridge the gap, when democracy returned back to Nigeria in the year 1999, how do we now nurture the institutions of the legislature? How do we bridge that gap? How do we hone their skill? How do we avail them best practices across the globe? How do we ensure that we enhance the capacity of the legislature, so that at least they know what are the rudiments of legislation, what are the lawmaking process, what are the rudiments of representations, the rudiments of oversight, which are the key functions of the legislature. So there must be one institution or agency in place that will now perform these functions, whose mandate is to perform this function. And that was why the institute was set up. Initially, as the National Institute for Legislative Studies. But as time, when they now discovered that it's not just about the legislature. What about the political actors? What about the democratic institutions? What about the political parties? What about the electorate? What about the press? These are partakers, these are key actors in democracy. So by the year 2018, an act, came onto, there was an amendment to the act that set up the institute, and now we now match democratic components with the name, the essence of the institute. Hence, by that act, which was done or assented to by Muhammad Buhari, GCFR, we now have National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Study. In essence, is the only statutory body set up by an act of parliament in Nigeria today whose responsibility is to enhance the capacity of both the legislature and every democratic, institutions in this country.
And as you said, including the press.
Including the press.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. So when democracy returned in 1999, some will say it's a learning curve for Nigeria.
Yeah.
But then the institute came in 2011, and one would think that the legislature, having been taught and trained, because one of your mandates, if I recall correctly, is you also are part of the drafting of motions and resolutions, and then you do analysis of some of these bills, bill analysis. One would think that the legislature will be better equipped and Nigerians can be assured of proper representation. But many in Nigeria will tell you, what are they doing there? They're not representing us, they're representing themselves.
It's a case of perception. And you see, if for that perception, again, give it to them, people that tend to have that notion, give it to them. Unlike the judiciary and the executive that has been there for years. People are used to judiciary, they are used to the executive, but they are not used to the institutions of the legislature. They just believe, what are they doing there? As Riley said, what are they doing? They are just, many of them, voting, debating. But the most critical, the most key arm of government in any democracy is the legislature. And I keep on saying this. When we talk of government of the people, by the people and for the people, the only arm of government that symptomizes that democracy, essence of governance, is the legislature, either we like it or not. You see, Mr. President can be appointed or elected maybe from just 3 geopolitical zones. You can debate it, you can question it, you can. By the time it comes to the issue of litigation, they will say, yes, he has won. Same go for judiciary. Same for, you can have the major, judicial officer from one geopolitical zone, as long as they rise through, the rank. But the only organ of government where every shade of opinion, where every constituency, where every component of these countries are seen, that manifested, reflected, feasible, is the only is the legislature. Every part of this country is in the Aro chamber. Every geopolitical zone is the Aro chamber. Every ethnic group is in the Aro chamber. Every major language is the only. So either we like it or not. So I think the perception, as I said, give it to people that have that notion, that tend to really attack them, bombard them, as this kind of misconceived, perception, because of the nascent history of the legislature. Secondly, perhaps because of the nascent history, why the people outside there try to batch on them to say, look, they're not doing anything. The legislature itself, especially the National Assembly, especially, they are not telling their story. And I feel for them. They are not telling their story. Most of the notion, most of the misperception, most of the misinformation are due to the fact that people are ignorant of what they do, the dynamics, the operation, how things work in the National Assembly. Should Nigerians know what Nigerian parliament are undergoing, they will pity them. You see, I'm happy to be. I'm saying this because I'm talking from the point of knowledge, from the point of experience. Having worked with the executive before as a former minister, I know what obtains there, and I know by virtue of my role now as the Director General under the National Assembly or the Parliament, I can now make comparison, to say vividly that in terms of remuneration, in terms of allowances, in terms of welfare, in terms of that arm of government that really control, that really garner, that really, benefit, so to speak, from the chunk of Nigerian resources, the legislature, they are less taken care of.
That might be arguable, because Nigerians will be wondering, they are there to represent us.
Yeah.
Many of them had jobs before they won the elections to go in there. So why should they be earning so much when they are not legislating for our good? And to think that they go through your institute, do they go through your, how often, how much time do they spend in the institute to learn?
That position is unscientific. That they are not doing much is unscientific.
It's unscientific.
You understand? Their role is to legislate. They are not to provide water. They can only facilitate through legislation. They are not to provide road. They can only facilitate through legislation. They are to ensure compliance from the executive. So Nigerians wouldn't know the role, legislation, representation,
so if they are
oversight.
If they are to legislate and they are not, they can't compel the executive to do it.
That is the problem.
But they've not been empowered to do that by the law.
That is the problem. You see, the kind of democracy we operate is one democracy that tilts toward the executive, that gives more power to the executive, that gives more preponderance, to the executive. Is one democracy whereby the legislature, the parliament, has little or no power when it comes to asserting authority. Get it right. One of the key roles of the legislature is that of oversight, is to ensure compliance, is to ensure that the executive are accountable, is to ensure that resources budgeted for are being judiciously utilized. And the parliament could get this thing done through the oversight function, through public hearing, through summoning of the executive or other MDAs, but on several occasions, even when MDA chief executive was summoned, they failed to appear, nothing happened. When IG was summoned, they failed to appear, nothing happened. When Constant Boss was summoned, he failed to appear, nothing happened. When oversight are conducted and you are expected to come back to the parliament and be answerable to certain issue, when they fail to appear, nothing happened. In terms of, compliance, in terms of trying to, what do I call it, the power to really ensure compliance, the power to really ensure that things are done using the coercive apparatus of the state. Who control the military? Who control the police? Who control the security, chiefs? The executive.
For how long can we continue like this? Or what can be done to make the difference? Seeing that this is affecting the democratic process in Nigeria. And as you said earlier, democracy is a government for the people, by the people. And so if the people represented by the legislature summon you, the executive who's been employed, and you refuse to come, what can be done? Do we continue in this situation?
You see, we shouldn't continue in this way. And the perceptions about Nigerian legislature is not just akin to Nigeria. It's not peculiar to Nigeria alone. I think it's a global thing, especially in developing countries. Even in advanced democracy, it's about leadership, it's about the personality, it's about our willingness as a people to respect our laws. So I think that's number one. And that has to do with our political culture. The secondly, and that is what perhaps the parliament should start doing. Every MDA must present its budget before National Assembly. Appropriation is being done by the legislature. And where an MDA fails in certain area, either you are summoned, you refuse to respect the summoning, or you are oversighted and certain directive was given, you fail to yield to that directive, then the legislature has the power of the purse. The power of the purse is either to prevent or to deny such MDA, but some instances where even the legislature tries to do that through the instrumentality of the executive and the collaborations and some other intrigues. They tend to just, we belong to the same party, let's just give way. The point still remains. The legislature, especially National Assembly, they must be ready to accord what that institution deserve, that sanctity, that respect, that dignity. And you can only do that, work with the executive, work with the MDs, cooperate with them. But when certain things are not done in line with the wishes of the people, don't allow it to go. You have the power of carrot and stick. Where you need to use the power of carrot to use it. Where you need to use stick, dangle it on them. You must be able to do it. I think that's the best way for us to go.
Okay, so now that you've come this way, let's pick it up from there, where you talked about ensuring that the executives, when they breach the processes, you don't let it go. That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's look at it. How prepared are the members of the legislature to see, let me put it this way, are the members of the legislature above board?
Of course they're not.
Okay, so what's the guarantee that they will not be the ones even breaching the process? Case in point, a case that happened before, a member of the House of Representatives, I think he was convicted for collecting a bribe when he was trying to oversight the petroleum industry. How do you ensure that the legislature does not get drawn in inadvertently looking to enforce a breach?
You see, you single out just one person.
I gave an example.
Out of 400 and something parliamentarians in the National Assembly. And when people talk about corruption from one arm of government, I say, look, either the legislature or the executive, they belong to Nigerian states. They are a reflection of Nigerian society. If Nigeria as a country is seen to be corrupt, people that represent us, either in the executive, National Assembly, one or two maybe find one to two. So the fact that one person was found one thing, that's not really, perhaps, you don't draw a conclusion, perhaps, that the decision is bad. Yes, it's not in anybody's interest. If you, that you are to oversight, ensure accountability, transparency, you find one thing, it's not just the person you mentioned. We have other cases too in the past, just as we have cases among the ministers, MDs too. That is a general problem that government is trying to address. And that goes back to what I'm saying. It's about our political culture. It's about building institutions. It's about ensuring that we change our perception to government position. You understand what I'm saying? And that is where we come in as an institute. We just don't just, train them, enhance their capacity in the areas of rudiment of legislations, in the areas of lawmaking, in the areas of oversight. We don't just assist them in motion draftings or bill draftings. We don't just help them in briefs, analysis, or scrutiny, but even in trying to build their political culture. We do a lot. And that is why I believe you cannot compare Nigeria of today, our political structure today, with what it used to be in the 70s, in the 80s, 90s, or even 2000. Before you talk about infighting in the house, in the recent time, have you been seeing that? Before you talk about banana peel in Senate, in the House of Rep, in the recent time, we have not seen all those things. Before you can be, your ministerial nominee, your nomination could be ratified. You talk about money bags, money changing hands. That has not been a practice again. I think we are, evolving, we are developing, we are improving, and we have to give to ourselves. Europe, America, the UK, they did not just get to where they are today, in a day. It was a piecemeal movement. It was a journey. It was an evolution that got them here. And I want to believe too we are improving one way or the other. That is not to say that where we are shortcoming, our weaknesses should not be identified. And where they are identified, we should be able to address them. So the point I'm making is that, yes, the legislature is not immune to certain inadequacies. It's not immune to certain weaknesses. But I want to believe that Nigerian legislature, they are not as bad as the people, our people tend to, paint them.
Maybe because they are not communicating with the people. If a democracy is a government of the people by the people, and the people say, hey, you, come represent me, shouldn't you be having conversations? In your training of them, I mean, are they encouraged to return? How often are they encouraged to go back and have these conversations with their constituents?
You see, that was what led to the establishment of constituency office.
Exactly, but if you go to some of those constituency offices, they're dead. Nothing goes on there.
We encourage them to have constituency office. We encourage them to have town hall meeting. We encourage them to have a series of interviews or engagements with their constituents. But where a parliamentarian, refuses to do that, I think the onus lies on his constituent to ask questions. On several occasions, we come up with a lot of study to see the extent to which the parliament engage with their constituents. And what we discover is that the constituent will tell you, we don't want to see their face. What we want to see is money for the upkeep of my children. I want to do birthday, I need money. My wife is pregnant, I want money, hospital bill. My children are going to school, I need to pay their tuition fee. That is not the responsibility of the legislature.
Is it not because the legislature, the representative is not getting the dividend of democracy to the people that they are asking for these things?
So, when you look at the remuneration, when you look at the take-home package, I'm not trying to put any defense. I'm just seeing it empirically.
No, don't get me wrong. The dividend of democracy I'm talking about is not as for remuneration and all of that. Hospitals, health insurance, housing insurance, and all of these things, shouldn't they be legislated and enforced?
Because Nigerian people, because of the level of our political culture, do not even know that the work they have sent them to go and do is not to do this. It's to make law that will bring about this, not to give, not to facilitate through legislation, to facilitate through ensuring that the MDAs discharge their responsibility in this area. It's not for them to give.
No, they are not supposed to.
You understand what I'm saying? And when you now look at what the Parliament, especially the National Assembly, 9th Assembly has done, for instance, which I want to believe the 10th Assembly are going to really consolidate. Look at some of the landmark legislations. Let's just take one. You talk of the Student Loan Act. Are you now saying that bill is not out to address the plight of Nigerian students?
That is questionable.
You understand?
And it's debatable because
in terms of law, it's debatable.
The law is there.
Law is here.
Okay, yes.
And that is their own work to do. It's not left for the executive to comply. And it's left for the legislature to ensure that compliance. But in the course of ensuring that they comply, the executive at times may tend to say, no, we're not going to do it. And when they don't do it, does the legislature have the power of sanction? No.
The laws are made. The acts that set up these institutions, even the Constitution that is the Bible, or so to speak, the holy book of this nation, the manual for running this nation, is in the hands of the legislature. When they see these breaches, shouldn't these breaches give them impetus, especially when they are there to represent their people? Shouldn't it give them impetus to look at the document and work it so that it will get what they need to
Let
get?
me go back to 9th Assembly again. When the legislature, the 9th Assembly, the senators and the House of Representatives discover the lacuna in a various law, they rose up to the challenge and they were able to come up with, an amendment to that effect. Because we just observed that certain things were not going right. For instance, in case of pipeline vandalism, who is in charge? Is it the police? Is it the civil defense? Is still when it comes to security issues, who is the first point of call? Is it the NSA? When it comes to the issue of mobilizing troops in the army, for instance, who will take charge? Is it the defense chief of defense staff, or the chief of army staff? So there are issues, very knotty issue. And the Parliament, under the 9th Assembly, were able to look at all this and came up with a critical amendment. Some of these amendments, or bills, did not see the light of the day.
I think they were not assented.
Because Mr. President has a power, yes, to assent or to decline assent. Yes, I know. When they decline assent, we may say you have the veto to do certain things. But that one, by the time you got to know it, time was of essence. Time were not there to really look at it. So some of these bills are now going back again to the 10th Assembly. And I want to assure you, the 10th Assembly will look into it again and we'll start all over again. So the point I'm making is that we appreciate that we are evolving as a democracy. We appreciate the fact that the legislature is still very, very nascent compared to other arms of government in this country. But again, we should appreciate the fact that to a large extent, I think they are doing very well compared to what it used to be in the past. But that major problem is there. The power to control the coercive apparatus in the country that ensure compliance and sanction where and hearing MDs fail to comply with certain laws and directives of the legislature.
Yes, to be taken care of. Oh, look, you've talked about you've mentioned the political culture of Nigeria a couple of times. So let's look at the recent elections that just happened. I mean, the fault lines in our nation, the ethnic lines, the religious lines, were played up immensely. And some will say that that is not the democracy we want, where we are looking at where this person is from, who this person or how this person worships. Now, can those lines ever be healed? Because, as you said, the Nigeria of today is not the Nigeria of the 80s or the 90s or even the early 2000s. So with this institution, training people in the area of democracy and all of that, one would think that our political space should not be featuring this kind of ethnic lines. They are always there, but they should not be so prominent as to shake the system, to shake our nation so much that some people got scared with the last elections. What should be done about that?
Democracy is all about mass participation in governance. And when you talk of mass participation, it's not just at the point of electioneering process. Mass participation in terms of majority people having the liberty to join any political party, having the liberty of freedom, the right to belong to any political party. So it's part of the beauty of democracy that we have so many political parties. And it's part of the beauty of democracy that prior to 2023 election, we had 2 or 3 major political parties. I think my appeal is just this. It doesn't pay anybody if the country go back to where it used to be in the 60s or 80s. When I mean where we used to be in terms of political culture, in terms of these primordial sentiments, in terms of trying to sectionalize our political culture, our political leaning, our perception to politics. It doesn't pay anybody. We should be talking about inclusion based on nationhood. We should try to see ourselves as a country, as a nation, other than as nationality, as Yorubas, as Igbo, as Hausas. It doesn't pay us. Going forward, for instance, our political parties, our elites, or the various political, or candidates or aspirants should have this national outlook. We must transcend ethnic leaning, ethnicity, religion, nepotism. We must go beyond that. And the more cosmopolitan we have, in terms of bringing every shade of Nigerian into our political structure, I think the better for us as a country.
Talking about the political structure again and the political culture, your institute handles policy analysis. You look at policies and analyze them. And this matter of the elections came and went. And one of the first things that the current administration did was, poof, subsidies gone. And the electorate is going, hello, we elected you. Why are you doing this to us? We're suffering. Was that a good move for the democratic process, for the people that were there to be governed?
I think I've expressed my opinion on this on several occasions. I think one thing we need to ask ourselves is subsidy the decision to remove subsidy, was it born out of altruism? Was it born out of patriotism? Was it born out of sincerity? Was it a realistic move? The answer is yes. It was realistic. If you have to be Bola Ahmed Tinubu, you do the same thing. Because we now observe that we cannot be spending, we cannot be wasting resources, to cater for the purse of some selected few in the country. It's a realistic policy that any sane government must take. And that bold decision, to me, should be appreciated. And nobody's contesting that.
At all.
But the issue is maybe the timing.
And when it's done.
Maybe the timing.
Okay.
Maybe the timing, people were expecting end of June. In line with what the former president, or administration said, end of June. It came end of May. Maybe the timing. But whether it's end of June, end of May, is a policy we all yearn for.
Policy we yearn for, but then after the policy has been declared, have been put out there, the actions that are taken after that are not looking too good. Case in point, the president wrote to the National Assembly requesting for 500 billion. And of 500 billion, 70 billion goes back to the National Assembly. What does that say? Now, you might say it's for repairs of the assembly structure. No problem. But does the electorate understand that? You've just taken away something and caused an upheaval in the cost of everything in my life. And then you ask for 500 billion, and 70 billion is going back to the people that are supposed to protect me.
I don't think it's from that 500 billion they are taking 70 billion. You need to do your findings.
Oh, no. The breakdown of it.
I'm coming.
Okay.
I don't think so. But I don't want to start contesting that now, but I don't think so. But let me just say this. One of the few institutions that critique the timing of the removal of subsidy is my institute. And we now added a provision that yes, removal of the subsidy is not negotiable, but there must be cushioning measure. How do you cushion? How do you ensure that you cushion the effect of the removal? And after that, our policy statement, or do I say, our policy position, a lot of other research institutions, Nigerian stakeholders, everybody pray, clamor that there must be cushioning. We must cushion the effect of the palliative, of the subsidy. Now we all ask for it. Now we have gotten 500 billion. 500 billion, 8,000 to 12 million Nigerian people. You see, whichever way we look at it in terms of the distribution pattern, we'll get words. How the 500 billion is going to really cushion the effect of the subsidy. What the palliative is really meant for. Whichever way you look at it, I think we should rather not throw away the baby with the bathwater. You should look at the sincerity of the policy. Do we need the palliative? Yes. We need the palliative. Do we need to cushion the effect of subsidy? Yes. We need to cushion the effect of subsidy. Federal government come out with certain things. State governors met at NEC. They review it. Government continues. It's work in progress. But the point remains that Nigeria need that 500 billion. And if you can get more than 500 billion, be it. So that at least that can cushion the effect of the subsidy. As I said, work in progress because governors are still looking into it. The issue of having state register for how this money was being distributed, how it's going to be shared. government is trying to even improve on what the social investment, used to do under Buhari government, where there was no even any serious register, where there was no concrete scientific way of distributing 5,000 at that time. I think we should appreciate that. Coming to the issue of 70 billion, taking it away from it, I still go back to the issue of timing again. Do we need the 70 billion for the parliament? I would say yes. The timing of the 70 billion, I would say no. And I give you a good example. Just as I said, people who appreciate the judiciary and the executive, but nobody is giving the legislature any sense of benefit. Today, if you are appointed a chief judge, you'll be given a Prado and 1 Elox, 2. The senator and House of Rep member that have been elected, this 70 billion you're talking about is just 1 car for them. But a judicial officer, a chief judge, is taking 2 cars. If ministers are being appointed, on average, 1 minister is entitled to 3 cars. So for the executive, 3 cars. For judiciary, 2 cars. For the legislature, 1 car.
Is that what's obtainable in other democracies?
That is not the issue. Don't go into their first. If you look at our own first. But nobody talk about the judiciary. Nobody talk about the executive. Nobody talk about the minister taking 3 cars. Nobody talk about the CJ or the chief judge or the magistrate taking 2 cars. But every highs, every bombardment is on the legislature. I think we have to be empirical. We have to be sincere with it. You understand what I'm saying? Our satellite should be on the executive too. Our satellite should be on the judiciary too. And we can now see and appreciate that of 3 arms of government, the less remunerated is the legislature. So why the who's and cry about the legislature? Secondly, why, yes, we try to put up a defense to this effect and rationalize that position. Maybe the timing was wrong. And that's where I'm coming from. Maybe the timing of getting it done, but which better time will it be? Is it not at the point of settling down to do business? When I was attending minister, my vehicles came at the point of my appointment. When a judge is being appointed, his vehicle come at the point of appointment because he needs to work. So when a senator is being appointed, automatically the vehicle should. And what they are trying to do, National Assembly is trying to do perhaps, is to be transparent, to make it open. We are appropriating this money. Nigerians should know. And again, when you now look at 109 senators, you talk about 360 rep member, an average, a Prado today maybe 60, 70 million pounds, 400 and something. Yeah, the money is much, it's huge. As compared to 42 ministers, 3 cars times 42. I don't want to go into the details of all this. But the point I'm making is that, yes, I appreciate the fact that the country is undergoing through a lot in terms of hardship. And we need to be sensitive, to the sensitivity of Nigerian people. But again, government must run. The system must work. Instrument for it to work must be provided.
Also that democracy.
The working station for the parliament must be provided. Parliamentarians must not sit on the floor. They need furniture. Parliamentarians must not, walk on the streets. They need vehicles to move. These are realistic, infrastructure that we need to provide for them. But again, when you see Nigerians, shouting, crying to say, "Look, this is not fair on our side." Again, you appreciate them. I don't want to blame anybody, but these are essentials for the Nigerian Parliament to work with, and it obtains almost everywhere, not only Nigeria. The workability, how it works, is what is different. But that we need to provide for the legislature tools to work, workstation to work, vehicles to work with, mobility. I think it's just essential.
Professor Abubakar, we are almost out of time, but just before we let you go, this one question. Your institute, recently the president, when he went for the ECOWAS summit, he made a statement, and then when he went for the EU summit, also made a statement about institutionalizing democracy again on the continent, ensuring that democracy stays. And he said in his words, if I remember correctly, he says, Nigeria is back. How would that work out? I mean, your institute, you're studying democracy, so to speak. So how would that be? How can that happen?
You see, what the instructive aspect of that statement is that statement, Nigeria is back. That is to say that in the last 8 years or so, Nigeria was absent. And I'm saying this with all sense of responsibility. The last 8 years of the last administration, in terms of leadership in Africa, providing leadership in Africa, Nigeria was absolutely not there. We were absent. Either we like it or not, within the context of our African policy, Afrocentric policy, Nigeria, by our destiny, what you call divine destiny, we are meant to provide leadership in Africa. See the way, recall how Nigerian participated in the formation of OAU, AU, the sub-region, in terms of maintaining peace. But with due respect, under the last administration, that leadership position was not there. A lot of crises in Africa, Nigeria was not feasible. A lot of global engagement that involved Africa Nigeria was not at the forefront. See, the frontline position we used to occupy in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s, Nigeria was not there. So when it said the country is back, one, that we are ready to take charge our position. We are ready to take our position in the Committee of Nations, especially in leading other African countries within the global environment. I think that's number one. Number two, the issue of Nigeria is back because we have observed a lot of political instability in Africa, and nobody is talking. South Africa, yes, did a lot of incursion, meddling into the Ukraine-Russia issues. But in terms of how do we stem the tide of this instability, especially in West Africa sub-region, Nigeria is not at the forefront. You talk of the Guinea, you talk of the Mali, you talk of, even though you see President Jonathan doing a lot of things. But in spite of that, the juntas in Mali, they have refused to siege. I think that statement is one diplomatic statement that must be taken seriously. Nigeria is back. It's back to provide leadership in Africa, it's back to take our rightful position in Africa, and it's back to lead other African countries. In doing that, it goes with a lot of sacrifice. A sacrifice you cannot lead when your home is in tumultuous, is in danger. For Mr. President to lead ECOWAS, for instance, and through ECOWAS lead African country, more need to be done in trying to address our internal crisis, internal security challenges, the various threats to our monolithic entity as a country need to be addressed now and now and now. It's only when we are at peace at home that we can be seen to be doing something vibrant abroad. That's number one. Two, we need to address our internal economic crisis. It might take time, but we need to do that. The point I'm making is that Mr. President needs to look into our domestic situation, into our domestic political economy, for us to play any active role here in a global environment. Then finally, for us to put a check on the various coup plotters, the military juntas in West Africa that have taken charge of some countries in West Africa. As I said in my interview the recent time, Mr. President needs to do more, too, in addressing some of the challenges we are facing in our country. The issue of debts, we have piled up a lot of debts. How do we, it's one thing for us to start going abroad, take leadership, action, provide leadership directions, be proactive on issue of African issues. But how do we address our own crisis at home? The piling of debt inherited by Mr. President need to be addressed. How do we come up with a device of economic diplomacy to address the series of economic problems? In the last 8 years of Buhari government, there wasn't any serious summit on foreign policy. There wasn't any serious summit on economic diplomacy. There wasn't any serious summit that tend to even look at how do we meet our international creditors to address most of our domestic economic issues, especially the issue that borders on debt. There wasn't anything like that. I think under Tinubu government now, we can see a government that is coming out with policies that are born out of serious thinking. Yeah, that's where I'm going. There must be serious thinking, not just policy that you just take without recourse to research. And that is why I believe Bola Ahmed Tinubu need to take the like of our institute seriously. Research institutions must be mobilized to play active role in policy directions of the government. NIPS of Puru, universities, researchers, our academics, they need to play a role here. Our country is undergoing serious crisis, and we must all support the government of the day in ensuring that policy, be it foreign policy, domestic policy, economic policy, they are policy born out of research, process. To me, that's the best way to go. It's known for mobilizing manpower, reasonable manpower, going by its pedigree in Lagos. And I want to believe he can still replicate it as Nigerian president going forward. I think we need our support, and we're ready to support Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Professor Suleiman Abubakar, thank you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's our program today. Thank you for staying with us. We would like to know your stand on the conversation. Our social media handles are right there on your screen. You can also listen to this and previous episodes of the program via our podcast. Please visit our website, channelstv.com/podcast to get started. I am Nel Taigbe. Bye-bye.